Welcome to the Healthy and Redeemed podcast, hosted by Healey. Healey is a licensed counselor with a passion for helping Christians live healthier lives, emotionally and spiritually. Each episode combines the truth of God's Word with practical advice to help you in your everyday life. Whether you want to grow emotionally, strengthen your faith, or handle life challenges with more peace, this podcast is for you. We're so glad you've joined us. Let's get started.
To God be the glory. Welcome to the Healthy and Redeemed podcast. I'm your host, Healey. This is a special edition for parents as part of our anger series. I wanted to just take some time to share a few ways that I teach children about anger and about emotions in general. And if you've listened throughout this series, you know how important it is to know about anger and why we should make sure to manage this emotion. I will say this as just kind of a beginning note. If you have a child that is having angry episodes and you are having a hard time controlling it, they're having a hard time controlling it, sometimes it's just best to reach out to a therapist to help. I have worked with some children who have really just struggled, and it is sometimes bigger than parents can handle, not because they aren't capable, but it can be hard to manage it when you're really close to the situation. You might have other kids, you might have your own anger stuff. You can feel like a failure, that you're not being a good parent. So it's very hard to just go into that situation when your child is having meltdowns every day, or you're just having a difficult time controlling their behavior and you feel like you've tried all the things. It doesn't mean anything bad to reach out to a therapist. Oftentimes, that can actually give you some confidence in knowing what to do in the situation. And the therapist can help maybe get to the root of the issue. Maybe the child's experienced some sort of trauma that they haven't told you about, or you didn't know that was affecting them because it was, some time ago. Children can also express anger because sometimes that emotion is safer than sadness or fear, expressing those emotions, or sometimes they don't even know how to express those other emotions or how to verbally express those. A therapist will help the child learn to do that in spite of their meltdowns. So I wanted to just take this time today to share some things that I do in therapy to help children. And I hope that you can pull out some ideas to help your child. It is never too early to teach children about managing their emotions, and it's not ever too late either. So take whatever we talk about today and do what works best for your child. I do different things for each child that comes in because children learn differently, they engage differently, things stick with them better in certain ways. So definitely use what works best for your kids. I use a lot of books and games and drawings and different activities just to help them learn. So use what works best for your child. And I'm going to share some resources that I use specifically in therapy that you can use too. So, one of the things that I start off with always when kids come in for whatever emotion that they're having a hard time with, whether they're feeling anxious or depressed or angry, we normally always start off sessions with, well, after we build some rapport, we normally start off with learning the emotions, all the different types of emotions, and then talking about what makes them feel each of those emotions. Then we talk about how we respond to each of those emotions. And then kind of integrating that cognitive triangle that we talked about, that, our thoughts affect our emotions and our behaviors affect our emotions, and that our emotions can affect those two things also. One game that I love to use in therapy is Candyland. What I will do is kind of modify the game just slightly. I created a little sign that has all the colors on the board and then feelings that are attached to each color or questions depending on how old they are. As we play, in addition to landing on the certain color, we will answer a question or talk about that feeling. Normally, the question or the feeling, like yellow might be happy, and we will talk about what makes them feel happy and then the ways that they act when they are happy. It's pretty simple. As we play, I answer the questions too. I answer the things that make me happy, that make me sad, that make me angry, depending on the color that we fall. Now, sometimes if we're working on a certain emotion, I do pray that they land on that emotion, that they land on that color. But if, like, I'm landing on the color a lot, I really trust God in that game that we're going to land on the colors that we need to land on to be able to talk and work on those things. I think it's a real easy way just to integrate feelings into that game. You can do that with almost any game, though. I've got all sorts of games that I have integrated therapeutic techniques to help kids learn whatever we're trying to learn.
Do you want to teach your children godly traits such as kindness, gratitude, and forgiveness? The Red Ball is a story of Renata, a young girl who receives a special gift. When that gift goes missing, she is left to figure out what to do. Through her journey, she learns a lot about herself and what forgiveness really means. The lessons found in the book can be made even more meaningful with the Red Ball Companion Activity Book, featuring over 30 activities. Both books are the perfect addition to any homeschool curriculum or as a thoughtful anytime story. Get your copy today and help your child build a heart that reflects Jesus.
Once I feel like we have a good sense of the emotions, we might talk more about specific ones. I talked in the previous episode, the practical steps that we use as adults to work through our anger. I do a modified version of that with kids that we talk about all the things that make us angry. I have a thermometer with different, levels that it's still 1 through 10, and they'll gauge how mad each thing makes them, and then we'll talk about ways they react. After we talk about the ways they react, we will also talk about some better ways that they might react, and I will normally have some things that teaches them some different ways to react. We'll talk through them. They'll pick some things that might work for them in each angry situation. They'll normally be coping skills of how to react to that situation. Again, this will really depend on what the child's history is, like how they learn and what's really going on. If they're just experiencing anger all the time, then we will work on how to like work that out of their body and how to verbally get that out as well. So then we'll normally I will challenge them, like, let's try an experiment. Like, you go and try one of these things at home this week and see what happens. I don't promise anything great will happen, but we want to kind of see what'll happen. One thing that I normally do each time, it's the first or second session that we talk about if they are really struggling with anger, I tell them 3 rules that I always like to make sure that parents and children abide by, and it's really, really important. One is that we don't hurt ourselves in our anger. Number 2 is we don't hurt others in our anger, and we don't hurt things. Not hurting things basically means we don't throw things around and break things. We don't rip things up. We make sure that we're taking care of our stuff. Now, if something is meant to be torn up, because sometimes when kids have a lot of adrenaline, I might do like an old phone book or something that they can practice ripping up, or ripping up a piece of paper or something like that. As long as we've decided beforehand that's okay, then that's what we do. But most of the time, we say we're not going to hurt things. So we don't hurt ourselves, we don't hurt others, and we don't hurt things. And that would be for all emotions, that we make sure we abide by those 3 rules. And if we can at least do that, then we're on a roll here. That's normally the criteria that when kids come back in, that we talk about, like, okay, did we hurt ourselves? Did we hurt others? Did we hurt things? That's going to be the criteria that we go by. I'd like to share some resources for you to actually use in your home that you can help kids talk about anger and learn how to be open in verbally expressing their anger. The first one is my book, The Red Ball. I think I talked about this in a previous episode. It's about children who experience anger. Specifically, Renata is the main character in the story, and she has some anger because a friend betrayed her. And that anger really begins to take her over. I love stories it's a great way to introduce a topic without really introducing the topic until you read the book, and then you can just ask some questions. I've done this with kids that are really, really super defensive that I'll just read the story and let it be. I'll be, what'd you like about that story? And just let it be that, just so they can have some time to think and process about it. And I may, like in the next session, talk a little bit more specifically about it. The one thing that I have with the Red Ball is a companion activity book. This companion activity book, I designed it specifically because I have some lesson plans, and as I was creating those, I was like, why don't I just create like a book for kids to take with them? Let me just tell you some sections. There are some story-based activities about comprehension of the story. There is a section on emotion-based activities, and that is kids learning about emotions. There are 13 different emotions that children had in the story. We learn about anger and thankfulness and just the different emotions and the different coping skills, how the kids learn to cope with their anger. Even though that's not overtly mentioned in the story, you can figure it out. The kids can figure it out. There's also a section on forgiveness based activities, and that has some activities based on the fruit of the Spirit, which that's what our next series is going to be on, the fruit of the Spirit. The companion activity book that is on Amazon, you can get both of those books for under $10. So I would encourage you that if you're interested in getting the Red Ball and talking to your child about anger or honestly any emotion, like I said, there's 13 different emotions in the book, that might be a great way to teach your child about emotions. Whether you're reading the Red Ball or another book, a great question that you can have after you read the book is, what kind of feelings or emotions did you see in the book? And then just kind of flip through the pages, and then so that they can pick out the different emotions that they saw. You can talk about if they've ever had those emotions before. Maybe, which feelings do you like to have? Which ones do you not like to have? What feeling did Renata have in the book? How did she change it? If they aren't too defensive, you can ask them, do you ever have feelings that you don't like? And how do you work to change them? Because they may not even be aware that they know how to change them. A more straightforward question about anger, how did Renata act when she was angry? How did she change that? Have you ever seen anyone with anger? Have you seen your mom or dad with anger? How did they act? How did they change it? So again, I mentioned that the companion activity book is great, but I do have some lesson plans. If you are a teacher or a homeschool mom and you would like to use a lesson plan, that is for free. They are designed to go with the book. You are welcome to email me. My email is on the website on the contact me form, and I'll be happy to send that out to you. One thing that I used to do in therapy all the time with kids, like I used to work in the schools, so I worked with kids just completely and totally. And one of the things that I created when I was there was a laminated sheet, and I put some Velcro on it, and we had some different emotions. It was just a scale 1 through 10. And then we had about 4 different emotions: happy, sad, scared, and angry. We would put each of those emotions, like how they were feeling that day, we would put each of those emotions along that scale. And it was really always helpful to see where the kids were that day. They shared kind of what made them like a 10 happy or a 2 happy and a 10 sad or something. I remember one child who would come in and they would always do a 10 happy and all the other emotions would be like 1 or 0. As we got to know each other, I used to challenge him on that. And I would say, it's really impossible to be happy all the time. And, he would respond with, "Yeah, well, I am." And we would talk about that. But I began to see a shift over time as we talked about the different emotions and that it was okay to have them, how, the happy would be a little bit less and the other emotions would be up, which would be more accurate to what, kids are feeling. Yeah, they do feel tens, but if they're always saying they're happy and they're never expressing any other emotion, that might be a clue that they're not properly expressing their emotion. They're suppressing all the other more negative feelings. That is good sometimes because you don't want to be just like living in your emotions, but overall, you should be expressing some of the more hard emotions like sadness or anger. Anyway, once he started moving the emotions up and down and it seemed more normal, I would really praise him for that. Like, good job in sharing how you're feeling because that is a hard thing to do. I think it's good to just share with kids. That is a hard thing to do, to share our emotions openly. Make sure you praise your kids as they tell you they're angry about something. Like, that's really hard to share. I appreciate you telling me that. I mean, it doesn't technically mean anything's going to change, but it's nice to know that they can express themselves openly and honestly. And it's not bad for them to have anger again. As long as they're not hurting others, not hurting themselves, and not hurting things, then we are going to consider that a success and that is good. And that from there, they can just manage appropriately, expressing their feelings, but not getting all caught up in them. One of the great things I think is always to be teaching your children coping skills, helping them learn how to cope with hard things. One of the resources that I have, it's a downloadable resource and it's actually on my Etsy store. I have an Etsy store for therapists to download resources that I've created over the years. Unless you're a therapist, I wouldn't necessarily recommend all those, but I do have something that I think would be great for parents, and that is called coping skill cards. And these are cards that you can download and print and then laminate is normally what I do, and I put them on a little ring and have these for kids so they can pick out some coping skills that they would either like to try or that they think would be good. You can get really creative with that. I have an instruction sheet to help you with that, and I'll put a link to that in my show notes, which is the description down below. If you're a parent and you're kind of like, what are coping skills? Or, I'm having a hard time thinking of any. There are some great ones on that. And sometimes these coping skills that I have listed can prompt other coping skills. And I encourage kids that if they have an idea that is not on those, there are some blank pages on there where they can draw or color those skills themselves. And then you can laminate those and have them accessible for kids to use. Another thing that I really like are books that talk specifically about emotions. It's not just within a story, but they're talking about feelings. And I have quite a few of those. Let me share some specific feeling books that I like. One is called The Way I Feel, and it covers emotions in a really simple way. And I normally do that with kids. I'll read it and then we'll do an activity identifying their own emotions. Then there's a great book called Double Dip Feelings, and it's about having two different feelings at the same time. I think this is a great book because often we don't think like how we can feel happy and sad at the same time. And I think it's just a great concept to teach kids that, yeah, like moving, for example, or going to a new school can make you happy and excited, but you can also feel sad from leaving the old thing behind. So anyway, I think that's a great book. Some specific anger books that I enjoy and I have is one is called When I Feel Angry. The author's last name is Spellman, and that's a whole When I Feel series, and it has many emotions listed in that. And I have the whole series because I think it breaks down each emotion well. And, it's written for younger children, but I'll often use it probably up to 10 years old because I think it's helpful. And, kids think I'm weird anyway. So I just go, okay, I know this is for kids, but I really wanted to read this story today. So anyway, there's a book called Sometimes I'm a Bumbaloo. It's by Rachel Vale. And this is a story just about a little girl who sometimes acts like a bumbaloo when she's angry. A bumbaloo is just someone who's kind of lost control in their anger. It's a cute story, and it introduces the topic well of sometimes we don't act too good when we're angry. There's also a book called The Grouchies by Debbie Wagenbach, and I think that's a great story on how we feel grouchy sometimes and then how to get rid of the grouchies. One book I think is really great. It's written by a couple therapist, and it is called Hip Hop and His Famous Face. It's written by Gary Oliver and Norman H. Wright. I actually have the book that has all 4 stories that they wrote in it. It's called Fears, Doubts, Blues, and Pouts, stories about handling fear, worry, sadness, and anger. Basically, Hip Hop's a rabbit who gets very angry at his friends a lot because they don't maybe want to do the things he always wants to do. It's a great book, and it's very therapeutic in its writing because these are 2 therapists. So I think it's a great way to just talk specifically about that topic. Or if your child has anxiety, Bruce Moose and the What Ifs is a great story that helps kids kind of identify thoughts and the what ifs and how they're not true. Those are some great books that I have found to be very helpful. I hope that if you get them, they will be helpful for you. And there are tons of other books on the market, of course. These are just some that I have gotten over the years, and I have found them helpful. I would make sure, though, when you get a book to use to kind of introduce the topic, to make sure that the message is one that you want to teach your kids about anger or whatever emotion it is. Because let's face it, I've read, and you probably have too, some books and about emotions that probably aren't therapeutically true or biblically accurate. Just make sure you read the message beforehand. Friends, I hope that gives you some ideas to prompt you to teach your own children about anger, about emotions, and how to handle them. It's vital for our children to grow up and learn how to cope with all the things that are inevitably going to happen in life. There are going to be hard things for them, and they're going to have to walk through some difficult things. Why? Because our children are not immune to the hard things of this world. We aren't either. And they're most likely going to experience a small t or a big T trauma in their life. And they will have things that happen that bring about anger, fear, or sadness. The best thing that we can do for our kids is to teach them how to manage their emotions. This is going to help them when they're kids, but also when they are adults. Because think when they're at their job someday in the future and someone swoops in and takes the promotion they deserve, we don't want them to harbor anger and unforgiveness. We want them to know how to cope with it and do well so that their reaction actually brings glory to God in the situation. We want that to happen in all of our interactions, that we respond in godly ways. I want to say, we've talked about this way back when, but for your children, to make sure that they also have components that you have to be healthy. That is to making sure they're eating right, making sure that they're sleeping well, and making sure that they have plenty of exercise. Friends, sometimes anxiety can just come on because they don't get enough sleep. So, as you help your kids have coping skills and work on these emotions, how to manage them and how to live with emotions, that you're also taking care of their physical body, all the physical things that we know that help stabilize our emotions. We want them to learn that we don't stuff our emotions. We have them and we manage them as needed, because ultimately following Jesus and pursuing holiness brings us life abundant. We want to be taking care of all parts of ourself. Let's close with this awesome picture from Deuteronomy. It comes after God has reminded the Israelites the things to do as a nation for them to be set apart. Deuteronomy 6:6-9. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. Now, let's go out and live healthy and redeemed, reflecting Jesus Christ rightly in all that we do. Thank you for joining me today, and Lord willing, I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening. We hope today's episode served as a helpful resource on your journey toward emotional and spiritual health. If you were encouraged, share this episode with a friend and consider leaving a review. It helps more people find hope and healing through God's truth. To access more mental health resources, visit writtenbyhealey.com.